Welcome back to Lawish. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah.
We hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day.
And President's Day.
And President's Day, of course.
Yeah.
So today we're going to give you an update on Andrew Tate. According to my notes, yep, still in jail. Jeff, anything you want to add?
Sucks to suck.
This was Lawish. All right, welcome back to Lawish. It has been a minute. It's been hard for me and Jeff to kind of coordinate our schedules. There's been so many things going on with President's Day and Valentine's Day.
Very
of course,
important
very
holidays,
important holidays that get in the way of things.
Also, hashtag lawyer.
Yeah, we got lawyer lives that get busy. But we're happy to be back and just share, I think, a relatively short episode, but a really interesting one. It's obviously ongoing, and that's kind of what we like to talk about whenever we get a chance. And today we're going to talk about the ongoing case against Alex Murdaugh. This is, if you don't know who Alex is, he is a prominent lawyer in South Carolina who right now is undergoing trial for the alleged murder of, well, they were murdered, but they're saying that he is the alleged murderer.
I think there's no question.
There's no question about whether the murder happened or not. It's not alleged anymore. But the alleged piece is whether he committed it. And this is the murder of his son, Paul, who I believe was 22, and his wife, Maggie, who I believe was 52.
Yes, right.
And this happened in 2021, June 2021. There's some interesting history with the Murdaugh family that kind of makes it just stand out from your normal, the husband killed the wife and the son or whatever. But right now, Alex Murdaugh is, I think, week 5, day 2021 of his trial. The trial started sometime in, I think, January 2022. But the murder happened in June 2021. The last thing that happened today was, I think, Jeff, I think you saw this, was the testimony of Buster. Yes. Buster is Alex Murdaugh's oldest son. And apparently, it wasn't great for the prosecution.
Yes.
Now, the articles in the news say that Alex Murdaugh was almost like smiling proudly as his son was testifying because he obviously, presumably, liked what his son was saying. Yeah. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what Buster said during the testimony?
Well, that's the interesting thing, too. It's like, obviously, from a defense standpoint, anything that's good news to help you like, you're going to be, I guess, in some way, like, obviously relieved to hear somebody say. But to be smiling about it when you're in the middle of a murder trial of your son and wife is a little weird.
Yeah.
But, as we know, people react differently to trauma and everything else completely differently. So it's hard to really, like, say, oh, well, that means he's guilty, or whatever. But it is weird nonetheless. But, he was called to basically try to, well, some of the stuff they talked about to me was not even really relevant, right? Yeah. They were talking about how the deceased son had, when he was younger, would take the older brother's ID and buy alcohol with it when he was underage. Right. Trying to, I guess, paint his character as being, at least being careless or whatever. But why that ties in or how that turns into him being murdered. Yeah. And his mother, Alex's wife, but the son's mother. I don't know how that really connects.
How does she come into play with?
Yeah. Or how that was even allowed in, quite frankly. But of course, I don't know enough about, obviously, what was actually said verbatim in testimony. But he was called, to corroborate. A lot of it seemed like it was to show how Alex acted after the murder. And they talked about how, he was apparently with, his father after that, 10 days following that, and how he was just a complete wreck and, so devastated by the deaths of his wife and the son. And, to the point where, like, they were saying he would, like, sleeping in random locations. I don't know why necessarily, but all over the place, to say, other than anywhere close to, like, where they would be or whatever. Which I don't know why he'd be sleeping at the kennel, like, because it's where they were murdered. Yeah. So it's kind of weird to me. But nonetheless, it was, trying to basically show, in the sense, like, this isn't how somebody, if they was a cold-blooded murderer, how they would act. Yeah. But, I think you see this in, anybody who watches, like, First 48 or anything like that, people can kill people and then it hits later and have reactions like that. Because I'm sure he did to some extent, assuming he did this, if he did, loved his son and his wife. Why he killed them, could have been for other reasons, which sounds like it was potentially. But so it's a way to his reaction like that, having that emotional reaction. If that indeed he did have that reaction, because the only person really around to see that would have been the person testifying, saying he saw
Buster.
that. Wouldn't really be. I mean, to me, that doesn't really prove anything. Now, it certainly helps, because again, if he's a horrible, cold-blooded killer, and you wouldn't expect him to be devastated by the deaths that he committed.
Which is kind of how Buster described it. It was like he was broken, devastated. He wouldn't even talk. He's just sitting there in shock.
Yeah, emotional wreck, essentially. And it's like you were like, well, if this guy's the one who did the murder, why would he be doing that? Why would he feel that way? He's the one who caused it.
On the other hand, would you? And this is pure speculation, but would there be the entertainment of a thought that he's doing this so that he can to pretend that he didn't do it? Us again, assuming he did it. We don't know if he did or not.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I commit a crime, I murder a couple people. How would someone who did not murder a couple people would react? And then I try to emulate that.
No, it's definitely possible. I think another possibility, and is maybe less likely, but possible, is that the son's lying too. And you get these people like, well, why would you lie if this, your dad murdered your mom and your brother? But one, we don't really know how he felt about them. Two, I mean, it's like when you get these situations where like the parent is like abusing the kid or whatever, or sexually abusing him or whatever, and they don't want them to get locked up because that's the only family member they have left, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And they'll lie about it, say it didn't happen, or whatever, to protect that person, because that's like, even though that person did a horrible thing, still family, and that's all I have left.
And that's it. Yeah, there's only half of them family I have left. And then again, going back to not to beat a dead horse, but going back to the prominence that this family has in South Carolina. I believe reading from some of these articles that Alex Murdaugh's father, grandfather, great-grandfather, they all were a line of important solicitors in South Carolina going back to 1920 or 1940.
Yeah.
So there's obviously prominence within the community. Who knows? I really didn't look into this, but who knows if Buster, the son, is kind of making his foray into that community as well, following the steps of dad and grandpa or whatever. Then it wouldn't be convenient if if you suddenly testify against your dad, or your dad gets found guilty of killing your mom and your brother.
There's also, on top of that, two other possibilities. One is he's afraid of his dad,
right?
And what if he testified and went against that? What might happen to him?
Still a powerful person.
And he just killed his brother and his mom. But also, maybe to some extent, it's possible the other son was involved or knew about it. Who knows? So it's like there's a lot of stuff that could be at play. We obviously don't know that right now.
And there's the big motivator, money.
Yeah.
Because what if dad controls all the finances of everybody, and the guy's like, well, if I testify against my dad, I'm desolate. I don't have I have nobody to pay for my lifestyle. I don't know what the lifestyle is.
And in his head right now, he might be like, well, they're dead right now anyway.
Well, that's it. And it's a cynical way of looking at things. It definitely is not a great way of looking at things, but it's possible when money corrupts and power corrupts, and so it could be a point where it's like, you know what, I'm trying to think about this in the most objective way possible. Nothing I say is going to bring my mom and my brother back, as much as I would like that to be the case. Yeah. Then I'm just going to make it easier on myself and not fuck myself over.
Exactly.
Doing something that has that I can fix.
Yeah, self-preservation, and also the fact that I think too, regardless, in the back of your head, you would be like, oh crap, if my dad did this, there's going to be that safety in the back of your head, well, what if he does it to me, or what if he tries to kill me, or what if somebody else trying to whatever involved in this does, and so there's a lot of stuff that could potentially be at play, but the basis, really just seemed like trying to show the guy's mental state after the fact, show how he was acting, show that he wasn't in fact this cold-blooded killer, he was showing remorse. He was not remorse, I guess, 'cause he didn't do anything, but he's showing this, he was clearly devastated by their deaths, or at least appeared to be, and it was not the reaction that you would assume somebody who committed the act would be, how they would be acting, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't know that it makes sense for us to talk about just the timeline of the crime itself. There's plenty of videos out there that you should check out, or articles. Although the prosecutor went into very graphic detail.
And I'm honestly surprised from a litigation standpoint that was even allowed in. Because it comes down to
You would think that it definitely inflames the jury.
Exactly. Because it's just so, and I mean, I guess, you're just explaining, but it's like you're using very, language that you can explain what happened without doing it in the way they did. It's very dramatic and very grotesque. And I think, yes, it's definitely going to inflame the jury, I think, to some extent.
It's a way to dehumanize. I mean, again, if you're the prosecution and you're trying to prove that this person did it, it's a way to dehumanize the person as a gory murderer, right? Who is capable of very atrocious things. Yeah. So,
and we're not obviously going to go into what they said. You can look it up yourself. It's it's very graphic. Where you're like, I don't know, but obviously it was let in. So
and that really is the interesting part, that it was let in, because you would have, in any case, and you know this better than anybody, you would be the first one to object and be like, nope.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's going to influence the jury. It's going to be, some undue influence on even just the image they have of my client, or if you're the prosecution, the defendant. So, but it came in.
Yeah, because it's not the prosecutor just saying, this is how they were killed. It was saying, this guy did this.
Yeah.
And here's how he did it. And here's what happened.
And here are the repercussions. Yeah. And here's how the
It'd be one thing if they were just like, oh, they were killed in this manner, and explaining that. But the way he explained it and the wording he used, it was not something that I would imagine would have came in, but it did. So that's all that matters. The judge makes the call, and
apparently they let it in. Well, we mentioned earlier in the episode that what made this, on top of this being a really interesting case, and I don't mean to sound callous about it, but it's just interesting when you then get to confront the intricacies of your actions, right? And what you do and how this unfolds in the legal system. So that in itself is interesting, but the reason why we think it has an added degree of curiosity, if you will, is that this family, as prominent as they have been for decades, they also have been involved more recently in controversy and less than desirable situations. And you and I talked about this a little bit before, but in July of 2015, Stephen Smith, and this was a high school classmate from Alex Murdaugh's son, Buster, the one that testified today or yesterday, he died. He was found dead, and with his car was like a few miles down the road, out of gas. The body was in the middle of a field, and the autopsy discovered or uncovered that he died by blunt force trauma. Now, there was always a suspicion, based on what these articles are saying, there's not my words, that Stephen Smith was killed. And allegedly, there was some rumors that Buster was having a secret affair with Smith. And then when there's secret affairs, there's always something goes wrong, and then crimes of passion happen. Yeah. Right? That was one thing. But again, 2015, the case really didn't go anywhere, and it remained unsolved. We're going to go back to this one in a minute. In 2018, the Murdaugh's housekeeper dies as well in relatively peculiar circumstances. So she fell down a set of stairs, and 10 months later, her family submitted a wrongful death lawsuit, and allegedly this was at Alex's insistence. Like, hey, you should do this, for your mom, whatever. Well, then later on, the attorney representing the sons of the deceased housekeeper, he realized that there have been payouts from the insurance company of close to $4 million, but that have been pocketed by Alex Murdaugh and some of his accomplices. So another seemingly unrelated event, tragic event, that happens in the vicinity of the Murdaughs.
Yeah.
And then the latest one, before, of course, the murder of Maggie and Paul, is in 2019, in February 2019. Paul, the deceased son of Alex Murdaugh, was involved in a boating accident where he was driving a boat while intoxicated, almost 3 times the legal limit of alcohol in his blood. And he crashed into this bridge, kills one person, injures like 4 other friends. So obviously he gets sued, right? And this is speculated that this accident was kind of like the beginning of the end of what they call the Murdaugh dynasty.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is like you keep getting in so many controversies that then this is just going to attract more unwanted attention, and people are going to look into your shit, right? And apparently, from what these articles are saying is that Alex Murdaugh had some shady financial deals going on. So his son Paul was indicted on 1 count of boating under the influence, which I didn't know that was a thing.
Let's just go with OVIs.
Yeah, exactly. It's just operating a vehicle because if you think about it, a boat is a vehicle, but this one is called the boating under the influence.
A scooter or
exactly, or a bike or a car. So I guess if you're flying, would that be flying under the influence?
Well,
or would it still be OVI?
It'd be OVI. Some counties even riding a horse is an OVI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or like a tractor, or
interesting. I didn't know that.
Ride on lawnmower. Yeah.
So Paul was indicted on account of boating under the influence causing a death, and 2 counts of boating under the influence and causing great bodily harm, because again he killed 1 person and he injured a handful of other people. But Paul was murdered before his trial. So then we move on to June of last year. This is when the double murder, the death of Paul and Maggie happens. And the reason I said we were going to go back to the 2015 one is the murders happened in 2021. The police investigates they keep referring to this, and this is new to me, but in South Carolina, the police essentially is the SLED, is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, I think. So SLED is investigating all this stuff, going through all the possible avenues. And this is what the article says, after they uncover the evidence and information from this investigation, they decide to reopen the case of Stephen Smith in 2015, because now they're like, we found some stuff that will maybe help us solve this 2015 unsolved case. The death of someone who was also closely related or had a little bit of a link to the Murdaugh family. So it's just like, I mean, if you wanted to write a movie script full of like very suspicious situations, this will be it. Yeah. So that's what takes this from a normal, which shouldn't be normal, but from a normal, case of someone accused of the death of their wife and their son, to just adding like an extra layer of complexity. And
I think what also adds on that is, of course it's what the defense is trying to argue is like, why would he, kill his wife and son? There's no indication that, at least that's been presented, that they were having any issues with relationship issues, family issues.
Exactly.
So then, so it's like, what other reasons could there be? And then when you have all this other events that have occurred, it really starts to be like, okay, maybe this isn't a coincidence. It seems like there's a lot of
or your family is like the unluckiest family in the entirety of South Carolina.
Possible, I guess.
Yeah, but again, it's possible. Is it probable? Probably not. Right. No, the motive could be based on, again, the history that we just talked about. For example, Murdaugh keeping allegedly $4 million from the death of his housekeeper. And also in 2021, like after the murders in September, Murdaugh was part of a very prominent law firm in South Carolina, and he was kicked out of the law firm. He was accused of stealing millions from the law firm. And the day after he gets kicked out of the law firm, he claims he was ambushed and shot in the head. Like there was an attempted murder on his life. So then it's kind of like, well, is this him trying to do something like fake an attack to present himself as, again, the victim of these very unfortunate series of events? Right, first they kill your wife and your son, and then now they come after you and they shot you in the head. You got kicked, but this is the day after you got kicked out of the law firm for stealing millions. So money seems to be a really prominent motive in all this
Regardless,
situation.
it seems like money is the driving factor behind it.
Yeah.
But how do you claim he got shot in the head? I mean, was he at the hospital? Was it
Him claiming that he was changing a tire and he was shot at while he was changing this tire. So,
And I think the biggest, one of the biggest pieces of evidence the prosecution is using now is his cell phone, like literally pinged minutes before they were murdered at the same location they were at.
yeah.
And of course, his alibi was he was nowhere near that, and he was nowhere near the kennels where they were killed. Obviously, at least his cell phone was. It wasn't him. And I think they had footage too, didn't they? Potentially, like security footage or something around that. Maybe not.
Yeah,
but-
I think there was footage. I think there was the footage and the cell tower pingings
they pinged his cell phone.
that placed them near where he said he was nowhere near.
Exactly.
Which was kind of just what makes it really suspicious.
It seems very suspicious.
Yeah.
Very suspicious, 100%. And so, yeah, I mean, that's for the prosecution, that's obviously huge. I think, going back to, because again, his demeanor in itself isn't really indicative of much of anything. Yeah, it looks weird, sounds suspicious, and again, him smiling and stuff like that, or laugh, whatever he was doing, smiling, I guess, in court as the testimony was being read by his son. But I mean, because we talked to before, like there's plenty of research done showing that people react in different ways, and there's no real what you think how somebody should react in a situation, being nervous, like if they're lying, for example, shaking, being nervous, shaky voice. It's not for everybody, and it's not really a good indicator if they're lying or telling the truth or whatever the case may be. And there's been a lot of research studies done on that. I know one book that I mentioned in a previous thing with OIP, which I think is kind of cool because it ties into that.
Yeah.
It's called Talking with Strangers. That same book goes on about all the research about that.
Okay.
And about how some of it's cultural, but even within the same culture, people just react differently. Their response is different. So him smiling, it's not really like, people are like, oh, that's weird, he's guilty, but like realistically, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. But him being in the area, not only him being in the area where this happened, but him lying about not being there. That is a huge win for the prosecution.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about the again motive, right?
Yeah.
What is the motive? Money seems to be a big prominent factor. So I was talking about how he allegedly faked that he was being shot at. Well, he admitted that he faked it later on. So he hired a former client of his to shoot at him.
Wait, this is not when he got shot in the neck, is it?
This is that time. Yeah. So I don't know how the conversation went, but he probably was like, "Hey, I need you to kill me, but don't let me know when it's happening, right? Just shoot at me." But
but don't actually kill me.
He admitted that he wanted the client to kill him.
Oh, really?
So that his son could claim a $10 million life insurance policy.
Not the son that he killed, right?
No, the son that is still alive, Buster.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean,
So again, we go back to a lot of money, $10 million on a life insurance policy, and so obviously him and the client that he hired were both charged on fraud and conspiracy for like a murder suicide thing, right? But then in June of 2022, him and the guy that he hired again were hit with new felony charges, and that was distribution and purchase of oxycodone.
Oh God, dude.
So needless to say, this guy is no longer a lawyer. The South Carolina Supreme Court yanked his license, so he's no longer.
It's interesting that the same son that's testifying in his favor is the same son that was going to inherit the life insurance.
Well, he was going to be the only one alive, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say that his son was involved in any way. This could very well have been Alex being like, you know what,
sure.
I don't want to keep living. I fucked up or whatever. If he did it, could be a guilty conscience. It says, how do I end my suffering without leaving my son without anything, right?
Yeah.
Or there could also be, I'm in financial trouble and this is only hurting my son. So the one way to do is to go out and just leave him with a little bit of a chunk of change.
And maybe it could be maybe other people were involved. Maybe he owed people money. Maybe he was at risk of being exposed, and like then he kills his family, and then he's like it's just so caught up in everything that he's like, you know what, like I'd rather just be dead at this point. Who knows? But yeah, it's obviously a lot of speculation. But one thing's for sure is this seems very suspicious, very suspicious.
Yeah,
and regardless if it's him or say he owes somebody else money or he's just trying to get the money for whatever reason, whatever the case may be, it seems very clear that it's likely he's the one who did these murders. I mean, you were there in the same location right around the time this happened and you lied about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there's a video from the kennel. There's
Yes.
like Snapchat videos. Again, I recommend if you're interested in this kind of stuff, just do a little bit of a like Google searching, because there's so much that has happened in this past 5 weeks that has been uncovered of the trial, where it kind of goes to what we're talking about. It's like there's a lot of evidence that just doesn't look good. Doesn't mean that he did it. He gets his day in trial or his many days in trial, but it's just the likelihood doesn't look great.
No.
And obviously he's going to end up being the decision of a jury, but so far it's just full of twists that are, honestly Hollywood worthy.
Yeah, and from a defense standpoint, that's the biggest obstacle we have to overcome is you lied about being there. This is saying you were there. How
That's
do you
a big
explain
one.
that away? If they can't explain that away, that might be all that matters to the jury. The rest of the shit might not really matter. It's you were there when they were murdered, or the same location they were when they were murdered, and you denied being there. Why would you do that if you weren't involved?
Yeah, and
Even if you didn't
you're the
pull
one that
trigger.
walks out,
Exactly. Exactly.
without-
Even so,
without
it was like a
any
hit.
scuff.
Like they came after you. One, why would you lie about that? And two, you're alive.
Yeah.
They're not. So
Exactly. We will provide some updates as we hear something that is prominent or that kind of changes the direction of the trial. In the meantime, Jeff, anything else you want to
yeah,
add?
just recommend again reading Talking to Strangers. I think it's huge, and I think it also is very beneficial for the OIP series, understanding a lot of what might the lay person who doesn't know the research behind stuff would think, oh, this is weird, this is suspicious, or whatever. But when you work in the institute or you looked into research, a lot of it's explainable and it makes a lot more sense, and it's not really indicative of guilt or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting read regardless. It goes into a lot more different topics, but I think it makes a lot of this stuff for people who aren't really familiar with the innocence movement, the psychological implications and stuff that's in play. It clears up a lot of that, and it's a very interesting read. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, follow us on TikTok if you don't already. We'll leave the handle somewhere on the screen, and we'll see you next time.
yeah.
This was Lodge.